lovely to be here. Some of you know that our Mother Anna was a member here, and so...
If you move the mic in front of your mouth.
You want, okay. This, wait.
I turned it up right at the wrong time.
Okay. Is it, can you all hear? Can you hear okay?
Okay.
When I first came to the monastery, Mother Victoria, who's our abbess, said to me, "Do you know how loud you are?" And I'm like, "I'm the quiet member of my family." So I've gotten slightly quieter over the years, I guess. But anyway, so today I wanted to talk to you about the Theotokos as the Virgin Mother, the royal intercessor, and the military leader. And we're starting, you know, how often during the services we sing, "Most Holy Theotokos, save us." And sometimes, you know, people who come from like Protestant backgrounds, sometimes that's confusing because we tend to use the word save specifically for Christ. But there aren't a whole lot of words that only have one meaning. And so I wanted to talk about this word sozo, which is I save. And so here's some of the definitions of sozo. It's preserve or rescue from natural dangers and afflictions. Within that, to save from death, to bring out safely from a situation fraught with mortal danger, to save or free from disease, to keep, preserve in good condition, or in the passive meaning like I am saved, it's to thrive, to prosper, to get on well. And then the second main definition is to save or preserve from eternal death. And there's various things in there that I won't inflict upon you. And the third is that you are doing both at the same time. You're saving somebody from eternal death and saving them from the dangers that we have to deal with. And so, for anyone who's confused about it, only Christ saves in the ultimate sense, but we all get to participate in that, actually, and nobody participates more in that than his mother. So, years ago, I was asked to give a talk on the Theotokos, and I thought, now what in the world am I going to say? And so I started reading through the liturgical texts to see what they have to say about her. And the 99% of the hymnody about the Theotokos is doing one of two things. It's telling us who she is in relationship to her son, and it's begging her to help us. And it makes sense, though, because there really isn't anything to say about anybody except for who they are in relation to the son of the Theotokos. And it's precisely because of who she is in relation to him that she can save us. And so her most fundamental being is that she's the Virgin Mother and therefore the nurturer. If you've ever noticed in an icon of the Theotokos, she is shown with 3 stars. And they are for virginity of body, mind, and soul, or sometimes they say body, mind, and spirit, perhaps body, soul, and spirit. And so what that means, I mean, it's obvious what virginity of body means, but it's speaking of this total fidelity to love of and trust in God. She's the second Eve, and Eve means mother of the living, right? And so she's the second mother of the living because she's the mother of Christ who is life. The first Eve lost her virginity of soul and mind when she ate of the fruit. And it's, and then it's generally understood with the fathers that if there had not been a fall, reproduction would have been different. And so it was after the fall that, she bore her first son. But the first loss of virginity is of the mind and soul, or mind and spirit, because she no longer trusted and loved and was faithful to God. And so we're born in a world where we're affected by hers and Adam's failure to love and trust God. We aren't born guilty of their sin, but we're born sick. We're born in bodies that are going to die. There's a quick, easy little thing people say, and anytime there's a quick, little, easy thing people say, it's usually only part of the story. But they'll say that the Western Christianity says that we die because we sin, but Eastern Christianity says we sin because we die. And so we're born in these mortal bodies that we have to protect. And, so a child is born crying to be fed. They're not born saying, Mom, hey, when you have a minute, would you feed me, right? It's like they have to take care of that body. They don't know of any other way to take care of the body. And that's not a sin, in the sense it's not against God. But it is just so super easy to slip from, I have to protect this body, to you have to protect me, to you should do this for me, to why should I do this for you when I need to do this for me? And so that is why almost all of us fall into sin. And again, this is one of these words that, depending how you're using it, like we say that the Theotokos is sinless, but we also call Christ the only sinless one. Okay, so the word sin, I think in the Hebrew, and I'm certain in the Greek, amartano, is to miss the mark. It's an archer's term, right? And so you can miss the mark for a variety of reasons. Like say I've got a bow and arrow here, and I'm shooting for the middle of the clock's two hands right there, okay? And what I actually hit is the table over there. And then you would say, Mother Melania, you sinned. You missed the mark, okay? And you would be sitting here going, probably like, there's probably not a worse archer in the world, that she's shooting for that, and she was actually hitting that. But what if I was in Mexico when I'm trying to shoot that arrow? Like if I got it here, that's a complete and total miracle, And so we all sin in the sense of we miss the mark of what God means us to be. But this is just my own way of understanding this, so, maybe somebody has said this before, but it's just how I understand it, is the Theotokos is sinless in the sense that there was nothing in her that didn't want to love and obey God. There's plenty in me that doesn't want to love and obey God. And so, before I go on with the Theotokos, because I used that illustration, I just want to help you, like, we judge people all the time. But we don't know where they're standing when they were shooting, right? And it's like, say I was shooting for the middle of that clock, and I missed it by like, you know, an eighth of an inch. And you would say, well, that's pretty good. Well, not if I was standing right next to it, right? And if I'm standing right next to it and I miss it by that much, I'm just being lazy. You know, and so often there are things that are easy for us, and we get a little bit lazy about them. And we think we're doing well, and we see somebody who is like the most annoying person we know, but they may be doing way better than we are, because they may be starting from way back. They may have a broken arm. Nobody may ever have taught them how to, you know, shoot a bow and arrow, but they keep trying. And so when you're tempted to judge, just remember, I don't know where they're standing, and I don't know where I'm standing either. I don't know how easy I actually have it. So anyway, back to the Theotokos. So there was nothing at all in her that didn't want to be fully focused on God. And that is why she's the burning bush, who bore in her womb the fire of divinity without being consumed. And that particular verse shows up a good bit. So you all, you know, we're talking about the burning bush that Moses saw, right? And people, even with pagan gods, people understood that if you were in the presence of a god and that god didn't hide his divinity, it would kill you. And that's just because they were powerful. But those of you who follow Father Stephen DeYoung and Father Andrew Damick, you know, their thing about death by holiness. And it's not that God doesn't want to harm us, but holiness and unholiness don't mix. And only one who is pure virgin of body, mind, and soul could bear the fire of divinity in her womb without being destroyed. Because again, you have to be pure not to be destroyed by God's purity. Now, have you ever had a situation like this where you were just having one of those days where you were just mad at everybody and you were just being a jerk, right? Like, I do that no more than like twice a week. But anyway, so you're having one of these days and you do something pretty rotten, you know, and the person that you do that to is kind and loving back. And now you have two choices. You can take a deep breath and go, hey, I'm being a complete and total idiot, forgive me. Or you can double down in your shame and your embarrassment. And that's only with people who are sinners like us. What would it be like to be in the presence of the holy God who dies for our sins and not be pure? That will destroy us. And, you know, but he protects us. And so we aren't destroyed, but that's why we have to get rid of the impure things. Not that God has a list of, well, I'll only talk to you if you have this and have this and have this and don't have that and don't have that and don't have that. It's not that at all. It's that I will be burned up by the love and holiness of God if I'm still stuck in all my unrighteousness. And the Theotokos was not, which I can even barely imagine to be that way. So, because there was nothing in her that didn't want to love and obey God, she was able to bear Christ. And the fathers, when it talks about Christ being born in the fullness of time, some of the fathers talk about that at least a large part of what that means is that the Theotokos had been born. That through, all the centuries and millennia, God was working with the people and, purifying the people, and then the one was born who was able to bear Christ and not be consumed. And so she nurtured Christ in her womb, and then with her milk, and then with her love. And because she's Christ's mother and we are his body, or we're his younger brothers and sisters, because he's the firstborn of all creation, she loves and nurtures us as she loves and nurtures him with her entire being. So a couple questions for us. How can we love others with our entire being? Is there some part of me that I'm refusing to give, that I know I should be giving, and that in my best moments I even would like to give? How have we lost our own virginity of body, soul, and mind? One of the most beautiful things that I've ever read is in St. John Chrysostom's work that is, there's questions about who it's really about, but he's, there was this person who was like, there was this Eutropiist who may or may not have been the person that this was about, but he was a rotten person who caused a lot of grief to John Chrysostom, and then he gets in trouble and he goes to the church, the main church of Constantinople, to get refuge at the hands of Chrysostom, right, who had been treating him very badly. And so he pleads with the people, like let's save this guy. It's a Chrysostom, despite the fact that this guy, was really rotten to him. And so in the second letter, he does this beautiful thing where he's talking about, when a man marries a virgin, she is no longer a virgin. But Christ takes a harlot and makes her a virgin. And, we're living in a time right now where, if you're younger, there's a very high chance, that you've been, you've lost your virginity. And some of us who are older, that was less of a temptation for, we may be going like, well, I didn't lose my virginity. Well, okay, but what about my virginity of soul and mind? What in me do I make about me and not about Christ? And not about loving the people that he loves? And yet, we need to see that. We need to take a look at ourselves and see what a mess we are. Because the only thing that God cannot heal is my refusal to admit that I'm sick. And so, if you're looking at yourself and going, I'm a complete and total mess, good. That's the first step. And if you're looking at yourself and thinking, I'm not a complete and total mess, it's like, well, maybe you're not a complete and total mess, but if you want to know more about what kind of a mess you are, ask your husbands, ask your brothers and sisters, ask your co-workers, they'll let you know. So anyway, Christ came to restore us from harlotry of whatever kind, if we will only admit that that's what we have become. And he can make us virgins. And his mother, who is the virgin, intercedes and longs for that. Okay, so she's also the royal intercessor. In the kingdom of Judah, the queen mother had like a special role. Like if you look at Bathsheba, right, when she was, when David was king, when she would come in, like she would bow to him. When Solomon is king, he bows to her. And obviously he's king, she's not, but she's his mother. And it was actually an official position such that there was, I forget who it was, but there was one queen mother who was so bad that her son stripped her of being the queen mother, right? So it was this title that she had been stripped of. And so, because she's the Virgin Mother, she is the mother of the king. And she has the boldness to intercede with him, the boldness of humble love. You know, like in the wedding of Cana, in that gospel passage, she's trying to get him to, do something about the wine, and he's like, it's not my time. And then she turns to the servants, it's like, just do whatever he says. Like, for me, that would have been a really dumb, stupid, hubristic thing to do. But she could ask her son, because even when it looks like he's saying no, she actually knows him. She knows his heart. And that is why, by the way, that there are things in the lives of just about any saint that should be labeled, do not try this at home. It's like it works for them, but it doesn't work for us. It's just like somebody that, you're just learning how to dive, and you're looking at somebody who just won an Olympic gold medal with a dive that had never been done before in competition. And it's like, don't try that. You will die. It's like you need to work on not belly flopping. And so there is a boldness that the saints have, that is the boldness of humility, because they know that it's not about them. They know it's all about God and his love and mercy. And so, because she knows her son, because she gave birth to her son, and because she doesn't want anything other than to love him and love the people he loves, she intercedes for the righteous and for the repentant sinner. There are some interesting stories about how stern she can be at times. What was it? There was a Russian story of a man who was a thief, and but he loved the Theotokos anyway, and he was at the icon, and she basically told him, like, you're repulsive to me. But that was so that he could come and be cleansed by Christ, so that he could be a child of hers in the purity that is the purity we need to be in the family of God. And so whether she's stern with us or kind with us, it's for the purpose of our repentance and the purpose of our purity of heart. So here's a couple questions for us again. Are we interceding for others before God? And keeping in mind, though, that this word sozo also has this very practical implication. Are we interceding in practical ways for people before other people? Do we work to give people second chances? Would we even consider a third chance? And about the fact that she's sometimes stern, if I think I need to be stern, how do I know I'm right? Have I sought counsel? And if I'm still convinced that I need to be stern with this person, am I dealing with my own impurity of heart so that my rebuke is out of love? I was just telling a story to Margaret and Francis about a situation of my own where one of the sisters was, I spent a long time telling them, but one of the sisters was driving me crazy and was doing something that was really highly, incredibly inappropriate. And it wasn't until I could look at myself and go, okay, I'm a mess myself, and you know, if I cannot correct her out of love, this is not going to work. And it was amazing how quickly the change happened when I changed. You know, when I was able to reach over and go like, okay, you know, don't do this or whatever, she was able to accept it. And so, you know, if you have kids and they're younger, or if you're a boss at work or whatever, you're going to have situations where you probably do need to rebuke people. But Christ and his mother rebuked out of pure love. I don't. But I can take a step in that direction, and then I can take another step in that direction, you know, and I can keep going. Okay, so then, third, she's the military leader. There's various translations of this. One that we tend to use is, O victorious leader of triumphant hosts, we thy servants delivered from evil, sing our grateful thanks to thee, O Theotokos. As thou possessest invincible might, set us free from every calamity, so that we may sing, rejoice, O unwedded bride. So I think the word that gets translated victorious leader, or at least part of that, is the word that in English has become champion. And what champion now means is just you're the best. But what champion originally meant was you were the person who fought on behalf of your group. And so like when Goliath challenged David, he challenged the Israelites and David responded, they were being champions. And so she's our champion. She's the one who intercedes as the military might, you know, this strong warrior. Okay, so she's this strong warrior. And so here we are, and we're in this very hierarchical church that teaches that the man is the leader in the home, and we do not have women clergy. But undisputedly, the greatest saint is the Theotokos, a woman. And this woman, who is famed for her obedience, is our great champion. Now, does that seem strange to us? Well, if it does, it's probably because we've lost the Christian understanding that authority doesn't equal superiority and submission doesn't equal inferiority. St. John Chrysostom likens the relationship of the wife to the husband as that to Christ to the Father. So in the Godhead, the one source in the Godhead is God the Father, but he's the source of two fully equal persons, the Son and the Spirit. And we teach that. We certainly haven't internalized it. And so we all want to be the leader because we think the leaders are the important ones. And we don't take, I remember when I was in high school and in Sunday school, and we were reading, the passage about, husbands love your wives, wives respect your husbands. And I'm like, well, that's not really very fair, I mean, it's like the husband, he just has to love the wife and, and the woman has to respect and obey the husband. And it's like, yes, but he has to love the wife like Christ loved the church, which is, to die for you, whether you take his care or not. And I'm just like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. I didn't believe it. I didn't take it seriously. And so we've lost in our culture an appreciation of the distinctly womanly role of bearing, nurturing, and raising children. Because it's not glamorous, you can't make a lot of money, people don't say, wow. And the corollary to that is we've lost appreciation of men as leaders in the home. Because again, we think that if you're a leader, you're better. And we don't understand what Christ calls the leader to do is to go out and die first, right? That's the position. If you're the husband, you protect your family with your life if you have to. And you also die first in the little deaths that you need to do to take care of your family. I'm getting off topic slightly here, but I remember one time I was talking to some youth from about 14 to about 22 years old. And I was talking about that. And there were a couple of boys that, I had by that time known fairly well, so I was looking at them. And I said, your responsibility is to go out there and die for your family. And their eyes lit up. I'm an Abbess. If it comes to it, that's my responsibility too. But it doesn't make my eyes light up because I'm not a guy. The vast majority of men have deep within them this desire to protect, and they will do it with their lives. That's why there's so many stories of men who, they're just walking along and they see somebody, drowning, and they'll go and save them, and sometimes they do die. And we don't honor that. And so it's very sad but very hopeful to me, like to say those few little things and see those guys' eyes light up. It's like, it makes me sad because like nobody's told them this in a long, long time. But it makes me happy because it's like, oh wow, I can actually be a man. And it's also the same thing for women. It's like how many women are taught like, well, do something important with your life. Yeah, something important, like, getting a job that that makes a lot of money, and not something like nurturing the life of a person made in the image of God in your womb and then with all your life. And it's like, if you don't understand that, we're losing some of the most basic things about being human. So the Theotokos is the great icon of the church because of who she is in relation to her son, as I said. She loves and obeys him, and yet is bold to say what she believes needs to be said. And she's our leader, our military leader, because the fight is against the demons and our own sinfulness. And the way you fight that is with humility, with trusting God, with knowing that his is the battle, not ours. We're not going to win it, but we have to wage it. And so that is why she is our champion. She's the one who can go and fight for all of us. So here's something like a question for us. You know, how do we interact with authority and those under our authority? So how many of you have seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Yeah, okay. Mostly everybody, yeah. You know that part where Tula's upset because her father doesn't want to let her go to the local junior college. I think that's what it was. And so she's crying to her mom, and her mom's like, don't worry, honey. You know, the husband, he's the head, but the wife is the neck, and she can turn him any way she wants. You know, the reason great comic lines are great is that they show us a truth and a painful twisting of that truth. And the truth is that every head needs a neck. You know, I'm an abbess. I'm in charge of this monastery. If I didn't have the sisters in charge of the office, we would be in deep, deep trouble with the IRS because I'm an idiot about money. You know, and so I need the people who will say to me, well, what about this? What about that? And that's an incredibly important role. And they're not less than I am. We're just different. You know, we have different roles to play. You know, and when the neck decides that it's going to wrest control from the head, all you get is whiplash. It doesn't work. It can't work. And so Christian virtue is going to look one way for a man and another way for a woman because, surprise, surprise, men and women actually are different, you know. But it's also going to look different for one man as opposed to another man, or one woman as opposed to another woman, or even a woman, you know, now and that same woman 20 years later. You know, God isn't interested in carbon copy men and women. We are not about stereotypes. We have saints who were empresses in their own right. And you cannot be an empress or queen in your own right and be all sweetness and light, okay? It does not work. You have to be pretty stern stuff to be able to do that. And we have, you know, saints who were men who, you know, had the more feminine virtues of humbleness and obedience. You know, I mean, to be a monk, to be a sainted monk, you have to either come by that pretty naturally or develop it. And so the question isn't, you know, okay, this is exactly what a woman's supposed to look like, this is exactly what a man's supposed to look like, because there's nothing in the Bible that is going to, that's not in the Bible, that's not what God wants of us. The question is, am I pouring out my life with humble love of God and of the people that he made and loved so much that he died for them and for me? If I am doing that, I'm going to be the woman that God made me to be, or if I'm a man, I will be the man that God made me to be. And it's going to look different for every person. And it's going to take every single virtue and reliance on all the other members of the body of Christ, because there's no me without you. If I have any virtues at all, it's because of the patience of my parents, my grandparents, my siblings, the poor nuns who have to deal with me on a regular basis, all those things, you know. And so the more I become the person God made me to be, the more I'm in right relationship with the people that He's put around me. So going back to the Theotokos as the champion, this is a battle that we can't possibly win on our own strength. We're fighting an enemy far, far beyond our own power. So the only way to win is with humble, joyous, submissive, and courageous reliance on Christ. And that pretty well tells us who the Theotokos is. So how about us? Are we trying to fight on our own strength? Are we even in the battle? So, Most Holy Theotokos, save us. That was what I had to say, but then I realized that I threw this in here at the bottom, and I do want to talk about this because it actually does sort of relate to all of this, which is, you know, one of the icons of the Theotokos is called Wider Than the Heavens, and it's where she has Christ in her womb, you know. And the reason I'm mentioning that is, like, she accepts lovingly and joyfully the domestic role, the role of being the mother, nurturing. She doesn't look at, like, well, can't I have this, can't I have that? Haven't you noticed how hard I'm trying to do this, or whatever? She accepts her role, and then she takes that home, and it becomes the whole heavens. You know, we become enveloped in her home, in her heart, because she's not about herself, she's about her son. And because she is about her son, she is the queen who can intercede for us, who knows exactly how, and the one who can fight for us. And this was something I've just been thinking about more recently, you know, because I was asked to do a chapter on a book about Orthodox Christian classical education. And one of the things I was doing was talking about the Theotokos and St. John the Baptist as role models. And there's nothing stereotypical about them. You know, like St. John, he's a very, very powerful man, but he's a virgin. You know, he's the manliest of manly men, and yet he's a virgin because all his love, all his desire is given to Christ. And the Theotokos, you know, again, she has the humblest role that most people don't even pay any attention to, and yet she's the queen and the military leader. And so, just be who God made you to be. And the way you do that is to just love the people that are right around you. You know, there is a very, very Christian meaning to fake it till you make it, right? The reason that doesn't work for most of us is we just fake it, and we're never going to make it because we don't have inside us the power of God, or we're not allowing that power of God inside us to be what it is. And so the Christian version of fake it till you make it is, if I did love the Lord my God with all my heart and soul and mind and strength and my neighbor as myself, what would I do? Do it. And here's the important part, watch your heart. My heart is often going, I can't believe they didn't notice that I did this, even though they're such idiots most of the time, right? You know, it's like, that kind of stuff goes on. I wish I could tell you it doesn't, but I mean, I'm like that. But so then you watch your heart, you see what's going on there, you go to confession, you ask, it's like, okay, Father, what should I do? And then you do it. And then you rinse and repeat. And as you keep doing that, you will become the person God made you to be, because you're loving the people He put in your life. We spend a lot of time, I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow more, but we spend a lot of time running around trying to get to a better place, a place where we can become the people that we think we should be. But unless you have a really, really, really cogent reason for doing so, don't leave where you are. Because that expression, wherever you go, there you are, right? So like, if I'm running away, I'm just taking an ever sicker version of me to inflict upon the next set of people, which isn't very fair to them, and it doesn't help me at all. And so it's simple but not easy, okay? If you want to become the person God made you to be, you just live the life that you're living and go, if I really did love God and my neighbor, what would I do? Do it. Watch your heart. Go to your priest. Listen to what he says. And keep going. You're not strong enough to make that work, but God is. So, all right, well, that was my second, I'm finished. So, any comments or questions or disputations? And I am sort of deaf, by the way, so.
In fact, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Maybe if they say something and
I was going to say, it's easiest probably if we give you a microphone so that we can all hear what you ask. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and Francis or I will, maybe we only have one microphone. Francis will come around. There's two. Cool.
You mentioned the hymn "Rejoice, O Unwedded Bride," and I've always wondered what that means. And is that, because isn't she married to Christ now? Just the timing of it, I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't mention that here. I mentioned another one, but unless I didn't pay attention to what I was saying.
I think you did.
Okay. Well, what I've always understood that to mean is like having not consummated a marriage. Because I believe that, at least in Hebrew times, and I think in early Christian times, it was like you were married when you consummated the marriage, which the Theotokos never did. I'm not saying I know that I'm right about that, but that is how I've always understood that. I don't think we would normally use the expression that, she's married to Christ because he's her son. But on the other hand, she's the image of the church, and the church is the bride of Christ. So I think in that sense, you could say that. I don't know if that was useful at all, but
She's still the mother in the church too.
right, she is the mother of the church. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so basically she's she's the icon of femininity the way it's supposed to be. You know, and I'll say this too, I mean, in terms, like, I never married. I don't have, you know, my own physical children, but I have about 12, most of whom are older than I am, which is sort of funny. You know, so I mean, I'm the mother of the monastery, right, of the Abbess. And so, all women are called to some kind of a nurturing role, you know, whether it's the one that most would take on, which is to be, you know, physical mothers, or, you know, to nurture others in other ways. And so she definitely has that role, but she also has the role of virgin bride. She's virgin bride and mother, so, yeah.
Can I ask one more question too? There's a prayer with Rejoice Mary. I was just wondering, when people pray that, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so do you ever, sometimes they translate that Hail, like Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Okay, that's like what the Archangel Gabriel says, right? The reason that sometimes gets translated rejoice and sometimes gets translated hail is that was how people said hi. You know, it was instead of, you know, coming up to you and saying, you know, hello, I'd say rejoice, which I think is a really cool way to greet people. You know, but that's, I don't know about the Hebrew, but that was clearly in Greek culture before Christ. You know, and that area was Hellenized, so I don't know where it comes from. But that's, so Gabriel was greeting her. But that's the beauty of it, and that's also what's important about understanding the different languages. You know, you're never going to fully get everything when you translate from one language to another. So he is telling her rejoice, but he's also greeting her. So for us, I mean, we're greeting her as the one who is full of grace, and recognizing that if there's anyone who has any reason to rejoice, it's her, and entering into her joy. That's how I understand it.
I have a question. Right here.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you see a correlation between having a spiritual mother and knowing how to pray to Mary in the same way of having a spiritual father and sort of knowing your relationship with God? And if so, how would you go about finding a spiritual mother?
So not everybody needs a spiritual mother. And we were also having this conversation about the term spiritual father means everything from the priest you confess to somebody like Saint Seraphim of Seraph, right, who, you know, is clairvoyant and holy and gifted in leading people, you know, in their walks with Christ. And we tend to think we need this like really, really spiritual person. So I'll tell you an embarrassing story. So most of my stories are embarrassing. But anyway, when I was a novice, I was, I don't know, upset about something or other, and sort of wishing Mother Victoria would understand me better, which probably the problem was she did understand me. But anyway, so our confessor at the time, Father Lawrence Russell, I was saying something like, you know, wouldn't it be really nice to have like a really wise and spiritual mother. I forget how I said it. And he goes, well, what would you do with somebody like that? And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And it's like, you know, if I'm a first grader, I don't need a PhD in math to help me with my addition facts. You know, I just need a smart second grader. You know, and it's like, you know, so like if I'm a first grader going like, well, I would definitely have gotten this if I had just had a PhD in math to teach me. And it's like, no, you're just not bothering to learn, are you? Or maybe I really can't, but then you have the humility of it. And so I don't need somebody who's a lot further along than I am. You know, like with AA, it's right, if you've got a guy who's one day more sober than you are, you know, they have something they can teach me. And so, I don't know that I would necessarily feel there's a need to say I'm going to this person as my spiritual mother, but there's a lot of wisdom in, you know, finding the people around you that are, you know, the women that are pretty holy, you know, the women that are on their way towards God. And, you know, often they're older. The priest usually can tell you who some of these amazing people are, that sometimes you know who they are, and sometimes they're just quietly, you know, loving God and loving their neighbor and doing it in a way that you haven't noticed. And often they're older. And so, you know, have a relationship with them. It's like, you know, maybe they need somebody to get their groceries for them. Maybe they need somebody to help, you know, with around the house. And be children to them. And that person, you know, part of that is they will know the Lord and know His mother. And they may be able to teach you with words, but they often it's just teaching by example. And, you know, the big thing we need isn't knowing all the right prayers. It's about loving God, you know, and being around people who love God. I mean, it makes it easier for me to go to God, you know. So that sort of answer your question. Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Sometimes you were talking about for us to accept who we are and to think of a person to become, because we are unique in our relationships and everything, and there are young people that have a very hard time accepting themselves, their hair, their body, they are not quite big enough, the nose is not quite straight, and so forth and so on. And things that are troublesome to a teenager. How can I help those? How can we help them? Because I think everybody may have someone who runs into a young person like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're living at a time where young people have so much to deal with. I mean, it's not, you know, whether my nose is right, it's whether I'm a guy or a girl, you know, whether I'm something in between. I mean, we're living in that day and age. I have a very close relative myself who is a young woman who thinks she's a man. And I know that's not exactly what you were asking, but it's the
But it's
super hard
it's
case.
in that, yes, to
Yeah,
accept
it-
really, because I think our eternal salvation depends on perfecting the me that we are, the person that we are. God has something in mind for us, and He should have made them differently.
Yeah, at this point, all I know to do is just love them. Like accept the person as they are. Get them involved. If there's some way they can help you, let them help you. I was just talking about this too. It's like their teachers will tell you that some of the kids who are the ones who can be the worst, the ones who are acting out in a terror in the classroom, are the ones you want to get helping you right from the start. Because like they don't know that they're of any worth. And in a way, I think that we've spoiled our children, of giving them everything. At least my generation did that. And sadly, what we did is we took away their worth. Because what am I worth if you just give me and give me and give me and I don't have to give you anything back? I'm like, you do that with like a calf that you're gonna eat, and so, be there, listen to them. Don't just, like with my particular situation that I'm talking about with my relative, like I'm still waiting for the opening, because if I'm going to be telling somebody that, and this isn't the part that you're talking about, but if I'm telling somebody that what they think is an essential part of who they are is false, is the opposite of the truth, the chance that they're going to listen to me if they don't know that I love them is zero. Why should they? Because I'm telling them something that requires that they're going to have to tear up what they thought their life was. And so, something I've been slowly learning is that words aren't all that useful until love is very clear. And so, when you're dealing with kids who aren't dealing with that huge thing, but just dealing with, it would be better if I were this, it would be better if I were that. If you just say, oh, no, you're fine the way you are, they're not going to believe you. Why would, they know they're in pain, they know. Whereas if you're like, gosh, that must really, really, really hurt. Like, and I'm really sorry that really, really, really hurts. And then you hug them if you have that kind of relationship with them. And then you go like, and then treat them like a person that God died for, And if we do that, if that's how we're seeing people, and that's why I was talking about this situation of my own with this one sister. It's like, I was just stuck in my own anger. And I knew I was. I knew I was wrong. I mean, it wasn't like, but I couldn't get myself out. And I just had to like beg God. It's just, I can't get out of this. You have to get me out of it. And He did. And it was like, you know, some of you are familiar with, you know, the book Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, you know, by Elder Thaddeus. And he says, you know, he's a lot of times talks about, you know, if one person changes, the whole situation changes. You know, and for me, I mean, I've been having to deal with that as the Abbess. It's like, God, you have to change me. You know, I have to be transformed. And so, I would say, when we're dealing with people, if we don't feel anything other than compassion for them, great, you know, and then ask God, you know, for help in how to love them in a way that they recognize as love that acknowledges their, you know, intrinsic meaning and worth. But, you know, there are very few, I mean, sadly, there are very few people that are in that kind of deep pain that aren't hard to be around, right? You know, that hurt people thing, you know? And I find myself judgmental. I find myself thinking, I've explained this to you, you know? This is very obvious. Just get out of it. Well, there's things that are very obvious to me, and I can't just get out of them. So, like, why in the world do I think that you can? So, it's been a...
I have one, it was a former parishioner, and that child eventually, and she was very active as a teenager, and then as she grew up, she decided she was going to be a man.
Yeah.
I am so taken and so put off, I won't even pray for her. It really makes me angry what she has done, because we had so supported the kid in every way, and then doing that, it's so painful.
Yeah.
That is another story. And, you know,
Yeah.
at least if they are not close relatives, I would think, you know, then you can do that, but it's not right. I know it isn't.
Right.
Because there is another child, also of a priest's daughter, who has decided at 25 she's a man.
Yeah. This is...
And it's to spite the parents, I think.
Maybe. I mean, probably some part of it is that, because to some degree, you know, our culture, we haven't really taught parents how to parent.
At least I can pray for her, but not for the other one.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would say, and this is like just tangentially related, and it has to do with your talking about your anger. For me, like, part of what they call nepsis or watchfulness, which, you know, the high levels of it are like, you know, the great monastic saints who, you know, could be praying while they're burning and be upset that they had to, you know, get out of that prayer so they could, you know, keep themselves from dying, okay? So, like, that's you know, the graduate level stuff, right? Which I have no idea what that would look like. But the beginning levels of nepsis or watchfulness is just watching what's going on in your own heart. And when you're, like, struck by a really strong emotion like anger or depression or like anxiety, something like that, stop and go, what am I angry about? What am I depressed about? What am I so anxious about? And the answer is never, I'm angry at her because she did so-and-so. Or I'm depressed because, you know, life would be so much better if this thing had happened or that person, you know, did this or didn't do that. What I'm looking for is the fundamental lies that I have taken in my heart. And so for me, and I really struggle with anger. I really, really do. And when I'm struggling with anger, if I'm focusing on, I can't believe she does this, I can't believe he didn't do that, I can't get out of it. But instead, it's like, what's going on in me? And for me, when I'm angry, there's two things that are almost always what's going on. And one is that, like, I feel humiliated. And the other is, I feel like it's my responsibility to hold up my corner of the universe, and I'm lousy at it. And those two things, you know, they just play off each other. It's just hellish, you know, because it's like, I'm supposed to have known this, I'm supposed to have done this, and I didn't do it, or I didn't do it well, and I'm so humiliated, and then you noticed that I was humiliated, and then I'm madder at you, and then because I'm even less able to hold up my corner of the universe. And it is hellish. But to stop and go, okay, I'm feeling really humiliated right now. I'm feeling like this is my responsibility and I completely blew it. And sometimes it was my responsibility and I did completely blow it. But again, beyond that, it's like, it's my responsibility to hold up my corner of the universe. Like, no, it's not. God held up the universe before I was born. He will hold up the universe when I'm gone, and he's probably going to do it just fine right now, whether I'm part of it or not. But very often, just stopping and recognizing that gets me out of that downward spiral. But sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I just, to the degree I can, I just sit there with God, and I'm just like, God, look at me. Like, I can't change myself. You have to. And so, you know, I don't know about your particular situation, but if I were in a situation like that with somebody that I had loved and nurtured, I would feel betrayed. I would feel powerless. I would feel powerless. I would feel like I messed up, you know, and then that would make me all that much more angry.
It's, you know, she came to me one more time, and I thought, you know, and I was so blind, I did not realize what was happening, and
Yeah.
it, for her to, I don't know, it was as if my world, what I felt, my belief, and what she knew what was right. No.
Yeah.
This is so hard.
It is.
It's I don't know. I still feel very powerless, and that's why I haven't gotten myself to.
Yeah. Well, you know, it also sounds like, I mean, there's an immense amount of pain there. You know, maybe you maybe just need to cry. You know, cry for her, cry for yourself, cry for this world we live in. You know, sometimes we need to do that. Yes.
Okay, I'm looking around the room and I see lots of women of different ages and of different roles in life. Some people are moms of young children, some people are empty nesters, some women are single without children, and so and you lived the monastic life. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about holy femininity, no matter what role we're playing in life. What does it mean to be made in the image of Christ as a woman and becoming more holy in our femininity? Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. I'm not that holy. But, you know, I mean, largely that's what I was trying to do here. You know, the vast majority of women are nurturers. You know, and all women are nurturers to some extent. I mean, I'm in a lot of ways a pretty masculine woman. Like I used to work with cattle, and I was going to prove that I was as strong as the guys, and well, which of course I wasn't. But I could hold my own to a degree, and I got pretty highly educated. So it's like I spent a lot of my life in a man's world. But I'm a woman, and women do nurture. And to be very honest, I would have married if I could have found somebody that I wanted to marry that wanted to marry me, But that just never did happen. But again, I think maybe we overthink this. It's like, there is, the story of Lazarus and the rich man, the gospel of the Lazarus and the rich man, and the rich man wasn't condemned for not going out and ending world hunger. He was condemned for walking over the person on his doorstep. And we have people to nurture right around us. And the way I do it and the way you do it are going to be different because we're different people. But if we just go about doing that, and not want to be the boss, if you're serious at all about your Christianity and you are a leader of any sort, it's like there's a terrifying aspect of that. It's like I actually do have to answer to God, for the people that He has put, in my charge. Now the other side of that, I remember when I first found out I was going to have to lead the group of sisters that became the monastery where I am now. And I'm like, how in the world am I going to pull this off, Mother Victoria? And she said, if you think that they're your responsibility, you're lost at the beginning. It's our monastery is Holy Assumption, and therefore it's the patron of our monastery is the Theotokos. And she said, the Theotokos is the Abbess, you're not. And so it's that balancing act of, anybody that you're leading, you lead with a cross. And so if you have children, you lead them with a cross. But, we have so much, in those cultures, you didn't have endless opportunities to do things, right? It's like if your father was the baker in the village, 99 times out of 100 you were going to be a baker, and whatever your mom, if there were things that women did that were different than just, like like in many places, the women, if it was agricultural, the woman just did, the agricultural stuff around, and so it wasn't any different from anybody else. You just did what, you knew what you were going to do. And there were occasions, like people who were poor may end up becoming priests or may end up becoming soldiers and, and therefore generals and things. But they weren't having to think, what is God's will for me? Should I do this? Should I be this? Should I do that? It's like God's will for them is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind and strength, and thy neighbor as thyself. And so, if we just, as the people we are, just try to love the people that God has put in our lives, we will become the specific women God meant us to be. And, it looks different.
I have heard this question from other people and wondered it myself. How would you recommend, if a woman is having a hard time getting to know the Theotokos better, how she might learn to relate to the Theotokos, especially because the Theotokos didn't have pain in childbirth, but we do have pain, so it might be kind of hard to relate to the Theotokos and ask her for prayers with our kind of more womanly problems. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, although I've not had children myself either, so I never thought about that part of it.
Well, even just, the biological part of being a woman.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think she had the rest of the biological part of being a woman. Just talk to her. We had a nun in our monastery who grew up Southern Baptist, and she was, some of you know who the evangelical Orthodox are and were. I mean, they're pretty much all in the Antiochians now, but she was in one of the churches that was, the original evangelical Orthodox, and she was struggling with the Theotokos, and I forget who it was, but somebody took her up to the icon of the Theotokos and said, Theotokos, this is Anne Marie. Anne Marie, this is the Theotokos. And as funny as that sounds, it actually really helped. And so, yeah, I mean, I would just go and say, I want to get to know you better, but I do wonder, how can I talk to you about this? And she might just tell you. Although having said that, as a general rule, if you're receiving visions and words, from angels and saints, what Mother Victoria always taught us to do, and this is specifically for visions, is you cross yourself and say, I'm not worthy to receive visions. So if you think someone, heavenly is telling you something, tell your priest, and if you feel very strongly you shouldn't tell your priest, that's a very, very good sign that whoever's talking to you isn't on God's side. So, all right.
You can also ask Mother questions about the monastic life or life in the monastery, but I think Kat has a question over here.
You can be right.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify, you said that you thought, or I don't remember exactly the way you said it, but the Theotokos did have the other, she didn't have pain in childbirth, right? But she went through all of the other biological.
I just always assumed that. I'm not aware of any teaching that says differently, but there may be. I just don't know it.
On Lord of Spirits last week, Father Raphael loves it when I start out like that. They did say that the main reason that Theotokos didn't have pain in childbirth was because because Christ was not born under the curse of Eve and Adam and Eve's in original sin. So that when Adam and Eve sinned, Eve's curse was that she would have pain in childbirth, and so it was important that the Theotokos not. But that doesn't really impact all the other parts of it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, and you know what? This is a very good thing. Don't believe everything I say. I'm not. I always say this. Sort of as a laugh, but it's deadly serious too. It's like my ambition in life is to not end up on the list of heretics that we go through on Triumph of Orthodoxy Sunday. So, if I ever say something that I ought not to say, it's like, and if something seems weird to you, tell me, and if it still seems weird to you, tell your priest, people make mistakes and people are limited, and I'm certainly both of those.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks for coming, and we still have some time, so we could get refreshments and visit and ask Mother Melania more questions more casually if you'd like. Thank you.
Okay.